Hello and welcome. This is Zach, aka FN Crazy, and I am doing a deck tech for my second place deck for the Saiyan Saga Escalation series tournament. It took me a minute to figure out how to structure this, but I think I'm going to start by just talking about my deck, and then I might make a separate, longer, really in-depth video later that's sort of breaking down the format and how I approached it. That's going to be a little bit more nuts and bolts and kind of long and dry, and maybe one or two people will enjoy it. But for now, we'll just talk about the actual deck that I did play and kind of what my thought process was, and I'll try to break it down as much as possible. So, just like a general overview of the format, I knew going in that the general thought that a lot of people were going to have was that the best deck was going to be a ball deck. And I figured there was going to be a good amount of people that were playing like very thin, slim 50 card ball decks, just trying to turbo out ball victory as fast as possible. But I realized pretty early on that I didn't really want to do that, mostly because it was really going to be difficult to try to win in the mirror consistently. And I tried a lot of personalities out, but I eventually settled on Goku for a couple reasons. And so my deck ended up being more of an anti-ball deck. I played basically as many of the ball-related cards as I could to stop my opponent from winning with ball victory, but my main goal was to win with survival victory. I was trying to be a beatdown deck. So first thing I did was I started with Goku. Goku was really good for a couple reasons. Number one, you get to play 4 Goku of each of the Goku named cards, and there's a card that we'll get to later on that's going to be the most important one. But there's quite a few very good Goku name cards. In fact, I would say Goku name cards in general are the best cards in this format. So having 4 of them was really nice, and it really contributed a lot to winning. The second reason why was Goku's level 1 regular was an energy attack. I wanted to be mostly energy life card beats because I wanted almost all of my attacks to threaten to steal a Dragon Ball in one hit. Goku was really nice because having an energy attack on your level 1, even though it couldn't steal a ball by itself, enabled one specific card that I'll get to later, but it was also just consistent chip damage that people didn't really know what to do with. A lot of times I would, people wouldn't want to waste a block on it, so it's a consistent 3 life cards. Also, only costing 1 stage matters a lot, because sometimes you only have a couple stages to work with. So it was really nice that it was a cheap costing attack, and he was the only level 1 that had an attack like that was anywhere close to this consistent, in my opinion. So those were the main reasons. The second thing you'll notice is I'm only running Goku 1 through 3. The main reason why was originally I was running 1 through 4, but as soon as I realized I wanted to have a maximum deck size instead of running minimum, I quickly realized that I just needed an extra slot for an extra card, and I didn't anticipate anyone was going to try to be really cheesy and have a level 1 through 3 anger deck. I didn't really think that was going to be a problem. I figured everyone was going to be running 1 through 4. There wasn't really any reason not to for most people, so I got to play an extra card in my main deck, and it didn't really hurt me, so I can't complain that I was only 1 through 3. It ended up being fine, I think. But yeah, Goku I think was excellent because of the name cards, and his level 1 was really, really solid. Alright, so here are the first 7 cards in my deck, and I think everyone's deck, pretty much all of them, started with these 7 cards. Pretty much every deck that I playtested in the format, I always had all 7 balls. The only exception was there was a couple of anger builds that I was experimenting with where I cut out the balls that lower anger just so I couldn't have them stolen on me. But even in those decks, I ended up running all 7 most of the time. I think this was mandatory no matter if you were trying to win by ball victory or not, because you needed to be able to contest your opponent having access to the balls, and being able to put them into play under your control was really important. So these were all mandatory. The balls that were the best, 3 and 5, were excellent drawing cards. 4 ended up being super important. A lot of times I would set up combats where I would end combat with something like Saiyan Truce card, and then I would use ball 4 to sort of block my opponent out from entering back on me and retaliating, and this would be really helpful if I drew like a fistful of non-combats, for example, off something like Vegeta's Quickness Drill. There was a lot of different reasons. Also setting up ball 7 So you could use ball 7 from your hand to end combat, but you'd search out ball 4 ahead of time to be able to make it so that you could end combat that you enter with ball 7, stack the top of your deck, use ball 4 to make it so that your opponent had to skip their next attack. So ball 4 was crucial. But obviously, when you play any of these balls, you have to play all of them. Notably, ball 2 was the ball I tried to search out last whenever possible because it didn't really help my deck accomplish its goals at all. In fact, it usually hurt me if they stole it from me because getting stage locked with this deck was a nightmare. And I was not playing physical beatdown. So losing stages was really tough. And then another important thing I noticed was when I was playing against physical beats, sort of like holding balls 1 and 5, and to a lesser extent 6, until my opponent got me staged down quite a ways was really important. So having my ball searchers out and then holding them until I could search these out at specific times, balls 1 and 5 especially, was really important. Other than that, you just had to pay attention to not accidentally leveling with the anger balls 5 and 4, which I did do once, and it was heinous for me. It was in the finals, as you guys saw. So yeah, not much else to say. The balls are important. You need to be playing them because you need to contest everyone else playing them. All right, so next up we have the ball searchers. I think once again everyone should be playing these. These 3 are basically all the same card. They just search for a ball and remove themselves. Pretty straightforward. Eyes of the Dragon was a really important one. I know there were some dedicated ball decks that couldn't play this card. I think this card was probably one of the most powerful cards in the format. I'm almost certain that every time I resolved this card I won. Maybe one time I didn't. But this card is really, really strong. So Eyes of the Dragon was actually one of the main reasons I played Goku level 1 regular, and one of the reasons I wanted to. So there was a point in time where I was going to be a 50 card ball deck, and I decided on playing Goku level 1 for a couple reasons that I'll get to later. But one of the reasons why was Eyes of the Dragon was an easy way to enable Eyes of the Dragon that my opponent couldn't necessarily stop consistently, or they didn't want to waste a card on. But yeah, Eyes of the Dragon is really important because it's a 2-ball swing, which can be huge. You can absolutely backbreak your opponent in some combats where you like steal a ball 3 or a ball 5 and then search for the other one and draw a crap load of cards. It's a really, really nice card. And so having a lot of energy attacks to enable this card was important. Having my level 1 enable it was really important. I actually won a game. I can't remember if it was. I think it was in the finals. I won game 2 because I used Goku level 1 early in a combat where I had a lot of cards in my hand, but I had a lot of non-combats that I had drawn. And I led on Goku level 1, and then I ended up sneaking in an Eyes of the Dragon activation, and that was crucial because I had no other energy attack, so he elected not to stop it. It was really good. But yeah, other than that, these 4 cards, again, I think these 3 everyone was running. This card was something that I think that you wanted to enable if you could help it. Alrighty, and next up we have Goku's Capturing Drill, and this was another really, really crucial reason to be Goku, in my opinion. Although, it has, there was reasons why other personalities were strong, but one of the reasons Goku was strong is because you got to play a 4th Capturing Drill, which was really huge. It taxed your opponent's anti-non-combat cards really well, and then just having a higher chance of drawing it, especially if I'm playing a 75-card deck, was really crucial. I think Goku's Capturing Drill was the most format-defining card. The entirety of most games revolved around who could resolve a Capturing Drill and keep it in play. And especially in the ball-related matchups, the entire game was basically Capturing Drill. And so I think that a large part of my deck revolved around getting Capturing Drill, and more importantly for my deck than having my own Capturing Drill was preventing my opponent from having Capturing Drill, which we'll talk about shortly. Because my deck can win without Capturing Drill, but my opponent's deck probably couldn't if they were a dedicated ball deck. At least that was the hope. So, yeah, Capturing Drill, incredibly important, probably the most defining card in the whole format. And if it's not this card, it'll probably be the card that I talk about next. Alright, so next up we have the removal suite that I think a lot of people played if not all of these cards, they at least played a few copies of all these cards. If Goku's Capturing Drill was not the single most important card, I would say that the next most important card was Saiyan Appraisal Maneuver, but that's largely because it was the best card in the format at dealing with capturing drills. If you landed a Saiyan Appraisal Maneuver early, naming Goku's Capturing Drill, some decks literally couldn't win because you were able to always steal balls from them, or you'd have your own balls in play and it would be very difficult for them to ever stop you from keeping them. The other thing was, in the ball decks, their Saiyan Appraisal Maneuver, their best target for this was actually your Saiyan Appraisal Maneuver, especially if they hadn't gotten their own Capturing Drill out. So Appraisal Maneuver was incredibly important. There was a matchup that I won in, I think, the quarterfinals, where basically game 3 in the quarterfinals, I got an Appraisal Maneuver early. I named Capturing Drill, and once I name Capturing Drill, I'm confident that I can beat you Survival v Survival. I'm confident you can't ball out against me, and even if you get rid of my Capturing Drills, I'm pretty confident that I'll be able to steal balls more consistently than you will. So that was a large part of this deck. It was an anti-ball deck designed to get rid of Capturing Drill, and once you get rid of Capturing Drill against a dedicated ball deck, you're going to win 99% of the time. Because they oftentimes didn't run enough cards to beat you down. You usually were running more cards than them, or the same number of cards as them, but you had more attacks than they did, so you could usually beat them. Battle Terms was the next best option because it could pick off lots of other cards, including you could use it sort of defensively to, for example, if your opponent had an Appraisal Maneuver but they had to pass, you could enter combat with the Battle Terms, and you could get rid of their Saiyan Appraisal Maneuver before they could even do anything. You want to use your Battle Terms last when it comes to targeting things. Untroubled Mind, I originally didn't play all 3 of these. I tried to cut it down to like 1 or 2, but eventually I just maxed out because I realized how important getting rid of Capturing Drill was. And it was really important that I did, because a card that I did not play that a lot of other people played was Orange Focusing Drill. And it was a really clever move because it was a card that I dismissed, mostly because for my deck, I didn't want to have more non-combats than I needed, because I really wanted to have a lot of attacks. And so I decided I didn't want to play it, but the decks that did run it, it was really, really crucial, and both the beatdown decks, the physical beatdown decks, and a lot of the good ball decks were playing Focusing Drill. And it was even more important to hit Appraisal Maneuver ahead of time on Capturing Drill if they were playing Focusing. But having the full set of Untroubled Minds focused help you get through the Focusing Drill so that your other non-combat hate cards could get there. Lifting Drill was excellent, but it was a little bit clunky, mostly because it was vulnerable to all of these cards, mostly these two. And so Lifting Drill could absolutely devastate somebody, get rid of their multiple capture drills at a time. It could get rid of the other non-combats drills, rather, like the joint restraint technique. It could get rid of Vegeta's Quickness Drill, but because it could get sniped very easily by these two cards, it wasn't as reliable. Additionally, this card got an errata where you can only use it when entering combat as the attacker, which I'm sure many of the people that were playing the league knew already. That if they didn't, they found out pretty early. But so you have to enter combat as an attacker, and you have to use it during your attacker's attack phase, so you have to use it in place of an attack. So that means that it's not quite as clean, but you play it anyways. It was pretty good. Definitely got multiple hits with it during the course of the event, so that was clutch. But you needed all these cards to combat the capturing drills. So this is basically the main focus of the deck, was using these, get rid of capturing drill. Once you get to that board state, you're usually in good shape. All right, next up for the drills, I have my card draw drills. Vegeta's Quickness Drill, I think a lot of decks were going to play this card. There wasn't really a reason not to run it for the most part, unless you're Anger. And even then, you might still consider playing it. The two red drills, which are both extra card draw, I'm not sure about these. I think that it was a little awkward because there would be some matchups where having the extra card draw wouldn't really help you that much if they were ending combat consistently against you. The extra card draw really didn't actually help much. And it's possible that these should have been focusing drills instead to protect my capture drills. I know a lot of the physical beatdown decks also played Orange Joint Restraint Drill in place of these, essentially. So that was also an option, but I didn't really want to go physical beats, mostly because we'll talk about when we get to the attacks later. But I didn't think, just against the combat enders, I didn't think physical beats were going to be nearly as good. And then the other thing with the two red drills that was awkward is if I had lifting drill in my hand, I couldn't actually play lifting drill with these on the table, and I have no way of getting rid of my own drills outside of like accidentally leveling up. So once I got the red drills in play, I wouldn't be able to play lifting drill if they didn't want me to. So that was another awkward drawback that definitely mattered in a couple matchups. But in general, there was definitely matchups where, especially coordination drill will let you draw as the defender. You could getting extra cards when you're getting declared on sometimes was really beneficial. So I think quickness drill, definitely don't regret it. These two I may reconsider if I ever played this format again. I might switch them to blocks or focusing drills instead. Alright, and then to sort of round out the anti-Dragon Ball tech, I have 3 Earth Dragon Ball captures, 3 Earth Dragon Ball combats, and 1 Vegeta's Dragon Ball capture. This card was, I think, really good in the... You would play it in both ball and anti-ball, but I think it was even better in anti-ball because being able to shuffle in a ball that you still have in your deck that your opponent controls, so like ball 3 or ball 5 especially, if your opponent has control of it, and you have a ball searcher, you can use Vegeta's Dragon Ball capture to put a ball back in their deck, and then on the bottom, and then you get to go search it yourself. Even more underrated, you could actually potentially lock a ball deck completely out of winning with this card. So let's say they stole one of your balls, and they had already removed from the game from that ball, right? So let's say you had ball 2 in play, and during the course of the game, they had to discard their ball 2 and it got removed from the game, and then they had captured your ball 2 at some point during the game. Well, if you Vegeta's Dragon Ball capture and you put ball 2 back on the bottom of your deck, and then they had ball 2 removed from the game earlier during the game because it was already in play, you could essentially make certain decks never be able to win because they would have no way of getting Dragon Ball victory, and some decks weren't playing any attacks. So this card was really, really, really good in certain spots. Even if you didn't use it quite that way, if you were able to use it just to prevent your opponent from winning, it would just stall games out. It was really good. It had so many uses, and like I said, you could put balls away so that you could go get the same ones. You could just slow your opponent down. There was a lot of options. Earth Dragon Ball capture was probably another one of the most important cards in the format. I think everyone should have been playing 3 of them. It was a way that if your opponent had a lot of blocks, some variants were playing block heavy decks, it was a reliable way to capture something as long as they didn't have capturing drill out. And since our whole deck was built around getting rid of capturing drill, it was pretty solid. I played Earth Dragon Ball Combat, and we'll talk more when we get to the attacks. But the main reason I played Earth Dragon Ball Combat over a different attack that did more damage that would still always steal a ball was because of the villain regular level 1s. So Raditz, Nappa, and Vegeta, all 3 of their level 1s, had a power that could reduce the amount of life cards you would take from energy attack down to 2. And if there's anyone playing a ball deck that was playing those 3, I wanted a card that could steal balls, even if they reduce its damage down to 2 life cards with that ability. And it did come up during one of my matches against Neil, I think in the semifinals. It came up in a matchup where he had Vegeta 2, or no, he had Raditz 2, or Raditz level 1, I should say, and he reduced it down to 2 life cards, but it was still successful, so I got to steal a ball. That wasn't against the ball matchup, but it was still nice to be able to have that option. So yeah, that was the main onus behind playing this, even though other energy attacks that can do more life cards would always steal a ball the same way. It wouldn't in that one specific circumstance, so I ended up playing all 3 of the combats. Alrighty, next up was the Anti-Anger Suite. So basically, these are the 6 cards that hose Anger the hardest. Most Powerful Personality Victory. I ended up deciding to play all of them because I was at maximum deck size, 75 cards. I figured I could afford the 6 slots, and I had no other way of lowering anger. Um, because I wasn't playing any of the physical attacks, and most of the good physical attacks were the ones that lowered anger, like blue round throw, for example. Um, there was a point in time where I was playing a couple blue round throws, mostly to use as a block, but I ended up cutting them, and I'll kind of talk about that later when we get to the combat section, so to speak. That being said, I don't regret running them. There was definitely matchups where drawing these was annoying. I drew Roshi's Calming and King Kai's Calming so many times in matchups where they didn't matter at all, but I think it was important to have them, and it won me my quarterfinal matchup. Or no, it won me my round 3 matchup where I drew Roshi's Calming into Cutting the Tail against I think the only most powerful personality victory deck in the whole tournament. I think was the Krillin deck in round 3 that I played, and I'm forgetting who I played. I'm so sorry. But I drew Roshi's Calming after he leveled up to 2, and then I drew Cutting the Tail and took him down 4 anger. So these 2 cards alone essentially counteracted 9 anger, which is insane. So I don't regret running them. And I think it was, I think it was important. I could have cut them and maybe run some more blocks, and then just hoped I didn't play the anger deck. But if I'd done that in this tournament, I probably wouldn't have made playoffs. So I think it was really, really important to do that. So I don't regret it. And like I said, it's only 6 slots, but they're so backbreaking if you draw them in time. And Cutting the Tail in particular, you can hold it until it's going to be worth 4 anger, or at least 3 anger most of the time. And these 2 is a little annoying because you have to draw them especially Roshi's Calming, you have to draw them really early. But again, I think it was worth playing them, and it I drew fortunately against the anger deck, but I didn't put them in my deck not to draw them, so I'm not going to complain about drawing them in the right matchup. Alrighty, so here comes the energy beatdown, or life card beatdown, maybe more accurately. So one huge part of playing Goku is you get to play 4 of each Goku's plan, which I think, if it's not the best attack in the format, is close. Goku's plan, excellent. Goku's attack is similar, although it has a remove from the game clause, which is, matters in some situations for sure. Can't rebuy it. But having these 2 plus Tian's physical attack, which probably is one of my favorite Saiyan Saga cards. But yeah, having the 0 stage activation, or attacks, I should say, was excellent. So I had these, plus I had a couple more attacks. So earlier we talked about the Earth Dragon Ball combats. So these were more energy attacks that I had access to. So got these 3, and then I have one more card, which I'll talk about in a minute, that was also an energy attack, and if I needed it to be. So, I'm running quite a few attacks. This is 8, 11, 14, 17. I had the 3 Earth Dragon Ball combats, that's 20, and then I had 3 more energy attacks that are also blocks, which we're going to talk about in another section, plus my power. So, I'm running, a good 23 attacks or so in my deck that are actual pure energy attacks or life card damage. And I think it was important to have all these cards can steal a ball by themselves, with the exception of the villain level 1's ability. And like I said, I ran as many of the ones that didn't cost anything, and then 4-Fist Punch does the most damage of any card in the whole format by itself. And then Mental Energy Attack was the next best energy attack that was just a generic energy attack, so I ran that. And yeah, I think these were all solid. It's very possible I could have shaved down on the mental energy attacks and played more blocks, mostly because I didn't anticipate there being nearly as many other beatdown decks, especially physical beatdown decks, as there ended up being. I think if I had to do it all over again, I might shave some energy attacks down, because I don't technically need as many of them, especially with Goku level 1, always having access to that. And I think having maybe more stops would have been beneficial in the beatdown matchups, which I struggled with. But I definitely think that, especially the ones that don't cost anything, I think those are all important. I think 4-Fist Punch just being so much damage, and potentially, especially if you double power against your opponent early in the game, setting them down to 0 stages so they can't use any of their energy attacks could be also really huge. So I think these were all really solid. And definitely, like I said, the zero costing attacks were really important. All right, next up are the physical attacks. Well, attacks that don't do life cards of damage, I should say. So hidden power level was, I think, solid. I might even play the third. This card was mostly because I realized really late that if I did play against physical beatdown, or even just an anger deck, because the anger decks mostly ran physical attacks, because most of the cards that gained in anger were physical. Plus, they didn't have to worry about getting stage locked. And I realized that having the ability to get to full, besides the Dragon Balls, which eventually you might run out of, was important if I drew into energy attacks. So hidden power level was solid. It never really did any damage, maybe one stage at most, but it was really important to get the full, and it clutched out a couple games for me. Goku's physical attack might have been the worst card in my deck. It's crazy because this card is like limit 2 per deck in the normal game. It's extremely powerful when you're Goku because you can use it twice per combat. But what I ended up finding in this format was really awkward with it was, one, the card doesn't do any damage. So if your opponent had a combat ender, they could just take the damage and let you draw the card, and then they could just end combat. And that was really annoying, so it was much better to have a card that just did damage up front than this card. The other problem with this card was there was a lot of times where throughout the course of the game, I'm playing like, I want to say it's like 30 non-combat cards, maybe. It was a lot. It was a lot of non-combats. So because I was playing so many non-combats, and a lot of them removed themselves from the game, but even more important than that was the fact that my opponent could hit me for damage, and if they got milled, I was playing 25 non-combats. At 25 non-combats, not including the balls. So having 25 non-combats meant that a third of my deck, a little bit more than that, was complete blanks. So if my drills got destroyed, again, most of the time they're getting removed from the game. Mostly if I got hit for damage, or if I got entered on and I had to discard my cards out of my hand. A lot of times the cards on the bottom of my discard pile were non-combat cards, and then having to sift through the non-combats to actually draw real cards sucked. So I think physical attack was actually trash in this deck, and I think that I would cut them for 2 blocks in a heartbeat, or even a hidden power level in a block. So yeah, surprisingly, that card ended up not being very good, despite it being one of the best cards outside of Saiyan Saga. Just my deck did not suit it very well. Didn't do any damage. Oftentimes would draw me irrelevant cards, or when I would draw cards, my opponents would just end combat and not care about it. So ended up not mattering too much. All right, and here are the blocks. These are also the secret extra attacks that I mentioned. So Black Knife Handstrike was amazing. Favorite card in the deck. May not have been the best card, but it was definitely my favorite. It was really consistent for me. Like in the matchups where I needed to block an attack, I could hold it long enough to block an attack. In the matchups where blocking energy attacks didn't matter, I had an extra attack. Even though it can't capture Dragon Ball, this was more important for the chip damage. And I think its versatility was great. So you'll notice I'm not running any Omni blocks. I think if I had to do it again, I would cut some attacks for Omni blocks. I would cut maybe the 2 Goku's physical attacks, and maybe the 3 Saiyan mental energy attacks, and I would play 4 Goku's Truce, and the 3rd Piccolo's physical defense. The stop balls were great, they were fine. Mostly the physical ones were actually ended up being the most important, because I won against Neil in the quarter or semifinals. I won against Neil because I largely drew into both of these in a lot of spots, or I drew one of the 2 of them, and then I would just hold them until the combat where he was about to go in. And I wish I'd drawn them more in the finals, to be honest, because they would have been good. Piccolo's physical defense was a card that originally I was going to play. So originally I was going to play Blue Round Throw, which was essentially an energy block in this deck, because I couldn't take advantage of the physical attack much. And ended up playing Black Knife Handstrike instead. Not even instead. I was going to play both originally, and then I just ended up playing less blocks, basically. I think that the physical attacking decks really care more about Blue Round Throw. I liked it because it was essentially an energy block that lowered my opponent's anger 1. And I ended up playing none of them instead, and I just cut way down on blocks. As I mentioned, I think I would want more blocks, especially just more Omni blocks. I think Goku's Truce is the best one, obviously, because it doesn't remove itself from the game at all. And I just found myself in some matchups, I just needed a couple extra blocks to be able to kind of stave off damage. This card was a cool card. I really enjoyed finding it because, like I said, originally I was running more Omni blocks, and Goku's physical defense, or Piccolo's physical defense, was sweet because in the physical beatdown matchups, you could use it to just gain enough stages to send off an attack, maybe capture Dragon Ball, go to full. So having the ability to get stages in the stages matchups was really nice. I think that, again, I think if I had to do it all over again, I would cut the 3 Saiyan mental energy attacks. I would cut the 2 Goku's physical attacks. I would play 4 Goku's Truce, and I would play 1 more Piccolo's physical defense. I think those are the main changes I would make to the deck. And maybe I would cut the 2 red drills and either play 2 more blocks, or I would play 2 orange focusing drills to be able to protect my other drills better. Either way. But yeah, I think that I ended up running less blocks than I should have, mostly because I really, really didn't think there was going to be very many other beatdown decks. I especially didn't think there was going to be many physical beatdown decks, but I underestimated how much people were willing to play Joint Restraint Drill. The main reason I did not play Joint Restraint Drill, and I'll talk about this more in depth when I come down to like the deck breakdowns, is because my worry with Joint Restraint Drill is that if you don't draw it, your physical attacks don't do enough damage in one hit to be able to do much against the ball decks. Now, it ended up being proved pretty definitively because in the top 4, there were 2 physical beatdown decks, both of which I know for a fact Neil beat multiple ball decks to be able to get there, and he was crushing ball decks like they had no shot. And then I think that who was it? Dylan in the finals, I think he also played multiple ball decks. I know he beat another ball deck in top 4, and I think I really underestimated the physical beatdown deck's ability to beat the other ball decks. I thought that they were going to have a much harder time than this deck against ball, because my assumption was if they did a physical attack, their opponent would just take it and end combat, or they'd, because they didn't threaten to steal a ball right away. And especially if they didn't get Joint Restraint Drill, or if their opponent was able to get rid of their Joint Restraint Drill because their opponents were playing all the anti-Dragon Ball cards, or all the anti-drill cards. And I figured that was so much anti-drill that you didn't want to draw Joint Restraint because people would already have cards in their deck that were going to kill it. I think what ended up happening with that was there were more people, because they sort of split their focus, where like they had focusing drill, so that already was harder to kill their drills. They only played orange drill, so they didn't have to worry about duplicating on like not being able to play their lifting drill. And then obviously focusing drill being in play was also orange. And then between focusing drill and Joint Restraint Drill, like it was like a pick your poison thing where like your opponent had to they only had so many cards that could kill drills, and if they didn't appraisal maneuver one of the important drills early before you played any of them, they were gonna have to there's 6 or 7 cards that could kill drills in play were gonna be taxed. And I underestimated that effect a lot, and I think that's what ended up leading me away from physical beats. And not playing as many physical blocks, because I just didn't think that people were going to be playing them. So that would be that. And then I got 2 more cards, and we'll wrap it up. All right, these are the last 2 cards in the deck. So I had Battle Pausing, which is a staple. Hilariously, also a card I think I might cut from this deck if I were to do it all over again. For similar reasons as Goku's physical attack, where you would just have awkward hands where you could only draw 1 attack with Battle Pausing, and you'd have a bunch of non-combats in your discard pile that you had you couldn't get through. The other problem that I would run into was, again, you Battle Pausing, your opponent just ball 6 or ball 7 from their hand, or they truce card, or they play one of the million non-combat or combat enders, and it just didn't do enough. You just gave your opponent stages for no reason. I think I might cut Battle Pausing. That's another card where I might cut it and play another. Either I might play an extra block, or that might be the 3rd focusing drill, orange focusing drill, if I was gonna play that version. The Saiyan Truce card was on the other hand, was pretty good. It's not as good against the ball decks, but against the beatdown decks, you could definitely, they steal your ball, you choose card out, or you choose card on your turn with maybe you play ball 3, you choose card after you search out ball 4 to make them pass. It was just really solid. It's too powerful not to play, and it's the only combat ender that I played outside of the balls. So yeah, overall was solid. And then yeah, general outlook on the format. I think I had a really good read on the format. I really wish I'd played more ball decks. I played against 3 or 4 physical beatdown decks, or like hybrid physical beatdown deck, like anti-ball but physical. I lost in round 1-1, and I lost in the finals to 1. So I think I underestimated the number of people that did not want to play ball or thought they could beat ball. I think that I really wish I had a route closer to what I think some other people had, was like every round they were playing against ball. And I think this deck crushes ball 90% of the time. In fact, in the quarterfinals, it felt like I had a worse matchup against ball than I think I did. I think I got drew really badly, and I got beat pretty badly game 1. Game 2 is much closer to them winning than it should have been. But game 3 was how most of my testing matches went, where if you look at my quarterfinal match in game 3, I drew a appraisal maneuver early, and then the game was over. It didn't matter what my opponent really did, because even though they were the 75 card version of the deck, and they had some attacks, they were in trouble once I appraisal maneuvered, basically, because they could never hang with me when I had my own capturing drills that they had to get through, and whenever they had no capturing drills to fall back on. The other thing was, this deck ended up winning by ball victory a couple times against the physical beatdown decks. I beat all in the playoffs, in fact. So Neil I beat once on ball, maybe even twice. I think it was once, though. And then I beat Dylan in the finals in the second game. I won by ball victory. And that was just a byproduct of, you have to play capturing drill in this format. Capturing drill is the most important card, and even against the ball decks, it was important to have. So, this deck wasn't trying to win by ball victory, because it didn't play very many combat enders, but it could. And in a pinch, it could. And if you drew well, if you drew a lot of ball searchers, a lot of balls early, you could just ball out and win. I know other people were like trying to make it a point to not win by ball victory. I did play an anti-ball deck, but only because I thought that deck was this type of deck was the best, and I think it got proven to be the best throughout the format. 3 of the top 4 decks were anti-ball decks, and only one of them was a dedicated speedball deck. So I think if, historically this format existed before the rules were updated, so you could play non-combat during your non-combat step. And again, I know most of the people in the league already know this, but people who have found my videos outside of that, in the old days in Saiyan Saga, you could play non-combats during the non-combat step, and you could play multiple of the same ball. You could play 3 of. So you had to win by ball or anger, basically, and because you played all the anger cards that raised your anger 2 that were non-combats, and you played them during the non-combat step. So once you modernize the ban list, so that you can't play multiple ball searchers, you can only play 1 of each ball, and you play by modern rules, and you play modern erratas, then I think that the format was really nuanced. And I think that people, when you first, your gut feeling when you first see like, oh, we're gonna play only Saiyan Saga, it's like, oh, this is gonna be terrible. It's just gonna be a bunch of people playing ball decks, and it's gonna be boring. And I think that there was a lot more to it. Like, I even more than I considered. Like, I thought anger could have been important, but it really ended up being the worst of the 3 like major archetypes. But I think even within, it was like you could play a fat ball deck, 75 card ball decks with all the combat enders and a couple attacks. You could play decks closer to like what I played, which was like anti-ball energy. But then also, and this is a deck that I didn't even consider, was physical beatdown anti-ball, where other people basically figured out joint restraint drill was really good. And I think the deck that ended up winning was probably the best deck, which was the physical beatdown deck with Goku High Tech level 1, because you could abuse how good it plus joint restraint drill was by itself as a little package, and you threatened to steal a ball frequently if they weren't powering up to full, because you had, outside of dedicated cards that raise you to full, gaining stages in this format was hard. So you could just keep them low, and that would end up being really clutch. But I'll go more in depth if people are interested in like a format breakdown. I think I touched on most of it, so maybe I don't need to. Maybe I'll just quickly touch on the other decks. But yeah, overall, I think that this was the best deck I could come up with, and I'm pretty proud of building it. I hadn't played the Dragon Ball Z card game in 15 years when I built this deck, so and I'm like I said, I'm happy with how I played, and I put up a fight in the finals even. So yeah, I'm glad people have been watching in the league and outside the league. And this video was long as fuck, so peace.